chapter 3, problem 40, and I did problem 39 in your text, which is very much the same. So again, I went to the data file because I could download the data, which made it a little bit easier. And we're talking about here, we're testing pizza in California and Iowa, and it's sushi pizza topped with tuna, rice, and kelp. Alright, and anyhow, not surprisingly, the folks in California scored it a little bit higher, but let's look at some statistics to kind of see where we're at. And again, we talk about range, and then we're going to get into calculating a variance here, because a variance and ultimately a standard deviation, which we'll do in our next problem, leads us to dispersion. Okay, and dispersion tells us more than range. It tells us, not just the high and the low, but the overall dispersion, I guess is the only word I can think of for it, of the sample or the population, that we're taking and that we're using. Okay, so the higher the dispersion, the more further away from the mean, I guess, a number of answers or number of responses, whatever the case is, may be. I hope that kind of makes sense. Okay, we'll see if we can explain it when we do the numbers. So anyhow, I think we're asked to find for each of them the range, the arithmetic mean, the variance, and we're supposed to interpret the statistics. Of course, that says through 38, but let's do that for 39 and 40 as well. And so for, again, I just downloaded the data I did, and I've showed you guys how to do that before. I did the max and the minimum. Our range then is just the difference between those two, right? The difference between that, which is 32. My mean is the average of these. Okay, and again, I do that by just hitting my button up there, hit the average, identify those, hit that, and I'm done with average. Okay, and I do the same thing for Iowa. So that gives us some data. We know that the range is a lot bigger in California. Yeah, okay, that gives us maybe some useful information. And then when we're interpreting it, the mean, okay, we can say on average Californians like it better. Okay, that's absolutely, and so that's what I would say. Okay, to start, when it asks us to interpret the results, I would say, or it says compare the two locations, that's one of the things that I've just found out, is that on average people in California like it more. Okay, but now we want to do the dispersion, and to do that, first we have to start with calculating the variance. Okay, and the variance tells us that how far does this particular number, okay, this person's rating, whatever it is, vary from the mean. Okay, and that's where we get the dispersion, right? The further away more of those numbers are, the more dispersed the population is. The nearer those numbers are to the mean, the less dispersed that population or sample is. And so I simply come to here, and this one's relatively simple. I just say this is equal to this one minus this one, and I'm going to hit the F4 so that it keeps that reference to that mean the same. Okay, and then I can just drag this down. Okay, now what if you subtracted this one from this one and I ended up with a negative 0.9? Actually, it's not going to matter, and I'll show you why in the next one, because when we come over to the next one, we're going to square this number. Well, and if you square a positive or a negative number, you end up with a positive result, and that's the reason we square this. We're just really trying to get rid of the negative numbers. Okay, believe it or not, I mean, you can kind of look at this and say, the dispersion's pretty great compared to this, right? When you just look at those columns. But once again, that's easy to do with a small group of numbers, but if we had a big group of numbers, we'd want to know why. Okay, and so to do the square, and I think there's a square formula in there, but again, I find it easier simply to do this. It's equal to this, hit my shift and the 6 key with the little tent, and then hit 2, which means squared, hit enter, and that does it for me. You know, I've got these numbers here. All I have to do is drag this down. Boom. Okay, it calculates all those for me. And just, you know, just in case you missed that, I mean, if I deleted all those and then I came up here and I dragged this down like that, it fills those in for me. And then to calculate the variance, we actually just take the average of these. Okay, we actually just take the average of these, and I've apparently I did it the hard way and did the sum of these divided by 10, which would be the average, right? So you could do it either way. You could come up here and just hit the average and say I want the average of those, hit enter. There you are. Okay, I do the same thing then over here for the Iowa variable. Okay, you know, obviously I use different numbers. This is equal to the 28 minus the 24.5 with the F4. Hit enter. You know, drag it down. Boom, I square everything in this column. I take the average here. Okay, so when it asks me to compare the two locations, I would say it's pretty obvious that California, the average person likes sushi, pizza with whatever stuff on it, kelp and seaweed. Sounds like a thing from SpongeBob. More so than the average person from Iowa, but that their tastes were more dispersed. Okay, it was a little more all over the board, whereas, you know, Iowa, they kind of universally didn't like it, is more or less what that's telling you. That's it for problem 39.